This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist. I hope you will plan to join me this year at Converge 19. Converge is the great conference put on by Conversant, the sponsor of this podcast, and it's in its fourth year of bringing together some of the world's leading companies for 2 days of dynamic speakers, thought-provoking breakout sessions, and opportunities to connect with like-minded professionals. You will leave the conference with new resources and best practices, allowing you to continue the hard work of driving ethics to the center of your business. In this podcast, we visit with some of the upcoming speakers for Converge 19. In this episode, I visit with Valerie Towery, and we preview her talk at Converge 19 on cross-functional collaboration by the compliance function. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode, and today we're going to visit with Ren McEachern, Managing Director at Exeger. Ren, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Good to reconnect.
I was wondering, for the members of our listening audience who don't know your professional background, if you could detail for us and tell us how you got to Exeger.
Sure, appreciate the opportunity. So I've been with Exeger now for just over a year and a half, and prior to joining Exeger, I was a supervisory special agent with the FBI here in Washington, D.C. In that capacity, my last job I was the squad supervisor of the International Corruption Squad for the Washington Field Office. And at that position, I was leading cases in FCPA, money laundering, antitrust, along with kleptocracy initiative as well. Looking at both sides of what we would call the supply and demand side of international corruption. So we're using the FCPA to look at obviously culpable companies and individuals paying bribes to obtain or retain business, and then using money laundering, kleptocracy, asset recovery, civil forfeiture, working closely with the Department of Justice, SEC, and money laundering asset recovery section, FCPA unit, to look at the foreign officials and looking at their assets and using the other violations as a way to target the foreign officials. As you know, we can't charge them using the FCPA. And so last, year and a half at the Bureau, I was leading that team basically around the globe, as you can imagine, leading those cases, finding ways to be proactive around those cases. And then before that, I was the acting unit chief of the International Corruption Unit. And in that capacity, myself, working closely with a few of my colleagues, we were able to actually build out what is now the 4 dedicated FBI International Corruption Squads sitting in New York, Washington, Florida, and LA. And those squads did not exist prior to our standing those squads up. Those squads were put together specifically to look at those same violations I outlined along the FCPA, antitrust, money laundering, kleptocracy, because the Bureau did not have dedicated resources prior to 2015 to look at those specific areas. As we all know, enforcement awareness around international corruption has grown exponentially. And so we were ramping up our resources around those energies. And that's where the program then got started. And one of the things we were doing when I was over at the FBI looking specifically at the international corruption challenge was also finding ways to be proactive. As you and the audience knows, the vast majority of these cases come in through self-reports and the painful self-disclosures that companies have to make that decision to come in and basically, report their findings and begin internal investigations and begin building their compliance programs up and putting new internal controls once the root cause analysis has been determined, and then also building up culture as part of the resolution. And so I was very involved with those discussions, listening to companies come in, every 30, 60 days, reporting the DOJ and the SEC on their progress. But we knew that those incentives were in place and those were working well with things like deferred prosecution agreements. but we also knew we wanted to be more proactive. And so one of the things we were doing at the FBI was looking at our overseas offices and looking to put agents and analysts to sit in the domestic corruption offices of foreign governments with their cooperation, of course, to get a better picture of real-time evidence and intelligence around potential U.S. jurisdictions or in cases where we want to share intelligence to other jurisdictions who are also looking closely at the foreign bribery issues around the globe. And then also we were beginning to leverage more of our toolbox, not just the standard interview and collect evidence, but also going to much more proactive techniques like using wiretaps, using undercover operations, and using the entire criminal toolbox that the FBI has access to be proactive with those type of FCPA cases. And so those are my probably most relevant years for you and the audience at the FBI, and it was a great honor to be a part of that program. I worked with some amazing men and women and got to be part of some huge cases and cases that are continuing now and some that were resolved. But I think, as we well know, the momentum right now in enforcement and certainly on the other side, on the advisory side, there's a huge continued push and a lot of energy around these areas.
Ren, you've moved over to Exeter. I was wondering if you'd give us a few words about your current role.
Sure. So right now I'm currently the managing director of advisory here in Washington, D.C. I wear several hats like everybody does when they go to consulting companies, but my main focus is to assist our clients with large cross-border internal investigations. Those could be FCPA, those could be reputational, they could be things like arbitration, it could be asset identification, asset recovery, basically large, complex matters that could take advantage of my experience at the FBI, but also taking advantage of some of the Exeter technologies that we have here in-house and some of the technologies that we use off the shelf to help our clients be really smart around big data or along complex matters and how to be more efficient, what we say pulling the thread and getting much better at finding those needles in the haystack when you're looking at huge amounts of intelligence and then pulling out the key pieces of evidence to understand and get to that root cause analysis to figure out what happened. And then from there, once we've helped in an investigation, we can also help them with internal controls and help them with design and implementation of those controls, and also help them with things like diligence and how to be eventually proactive with things like monitoring of third parties through our various offerings at Exeter.
Ren, if I could now, I'd like to turn to your talk at Converge19, which is entitled The Power of Integrated Third-Party Risk Management, a Law Enforcement Perspective. Could you give our audience just a teaser or a hint of what your remarks will be?
Yeah, sure. Appreciate it. And so it is an interesting, what I would say, it's not a new shift, but there were some comments even recently by the Department of Justice talking about really the importance of data analytics and also using technologies. And Matthew Miner of the DOJ made these exact comments not too long ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, talking about the importance of understanding data when you're doing compliance and running internal investigations. And so to that point, one of the key areas is certainly data aggregation. Many of my investigations was at the FBI, and even now on the private sector side, a lot of the companies knew after the fact that when they looked back at the root cause analysis, they had the information in front of them, they had the data, they had the ones and zeros, but they weren't in a position to aggregate that data in a way that they could actually see the fraud, see the potential corruption, or see the rogue activity or systemic activity of corruption within the company. And so, next week in Colorado, the thing I want to talk about is using data in a much smarter, proactive way, and we do that with Exeter, and also and implementing and integrating that into into the cloud. And we all know that this is really the platform of choice for global companies around efficiencies, around protections, around security, and how to do analytics better, faster. And so integrating key data sets, aggregating data, analyzing data, and then making sure it's integrated into your cloud platform to make sure that all the stakeholders have access, the people that are getting the information that need the information, the workflow is much more efficient, and that you can work through global problems with the efficiencies and flexibility that's really necessary now. And with Matthew Miner's comments, and even with my experience formerly at the government, the expectation of companies more and more is that if you're using data analytics on your business, you should be smart around your compliance as well, because in theory and now in practice, business and compliance and risk should all be integrated. The business should understand that when they're looking at strategic growth, that they need to have those discussions with the compliance people. And once you have that nice integration of data into the right cloud platform, you don't have to be reactive. You can actually be proactive around risk and third parties. And that is when good companies go to great. And when you can enter markets, emerging markets, what I would call challenging markets, and do that efficiently and in a smart way and be protected because you've got the right risk mitigators in place, that makes for a much smoother business process. And then you can get in and be smarter about market share and growth and doing the right things on the ground and protecting your employees.
Ren, that sounds like a fascinating presentation, and I, for one, greatly look forward to it. Unfortunately, we are near the end of our time, but I want to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I look forward to seeing you next week at Converge 19.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you as well.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I hope you'll plan to join me for Converge 19. It's going to be a great conference, probably one of the top conferences of this year, both in terms of educational sessions, breakout sessions, and individual moderated conversations. I know you will enjoy it. I have a few discount codes available for complimentary passes to Converge 19. So if you're interested, please email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. You can find out more information about the conference on the show notes that accompany this podcast.